Brilliant. So thanks, Annabelle and Cam, for agreeing to do this at such short notice. And just so that everybody's aware, both Richard and I are on this interview as well. Just to start with, Cam, shall we start with you? Just a general outline of your agency's approach and what's been put in place so far.
Hi, Sharon, Richard, and everyone. Thanks for pulling this together. Look, I think the starting point from our perspective, and having listened to a huge amount of people over the last kind of week or two, is we're kind of just over communicating as much as we can, whether that be individually, or I think this is a really good example of the sort of thing that Annabelle and I both agreed is a really good idea, just to kind of try and get messages out. The starting point for me, and I'm sure Annabelle is the same, is we do know how bad it is. I can tell you I've spoken to so many kind of producers as well as guilds and various other sort of entities. I've spoken to the CEO of Stuff, NZME, TVNZ, RNZ, all of the broadcast platforms, all the media outlets. So it's incredibly tough. And so I guess the first sort of point, and I guess the key thing in terms of what, as an agency, we believe we should be doing, is just listening and understanding the size and scale of the issues, which are obviously pretty immense. We are also pretty much in a daily conversation with a huge amount of officials within MCH. What I guess the industry should also know and take some confidence in is that the ministry and on up further are concerned and interested and want to know what the impacts are. They're asking us for our ideas around what might be created as we come out of this. So, right now it's listening and talking to the industry. It's engaging literally daily with MCH and providing them with as much information as we can. And then from our perspective, I guess it's what we're hearing from the industry is, to a certain extent, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but keep calm and carry on. They want to know that we'll continue to do the funding round, that we've got the money there, so that when we come out of this, there's production funds available. But at the same time, there's sort of two other things. One is what happens to the productions that had started and have had to stop, and how are we going to kind of support them? And of course, that's definitely something that we have in mind too. And then the other is, how do we come out of this thing and really kind of try and bolster the industry by some level of kind of additional funding, hopefully. So that's kind of it. Obviously, it's slightly less relevant for the audience that's listening right now, Sharon, but obviously we also fund music. So our music colleagues are also in dire straits. In fact, they hit the wall earlier than even production did, because the live gig industry, which is actually how they make their money, stopped about 2 weeks before everything else. And we also obviously fund platforms. So we've been doing a lot of work making sure Access Radio continues to kind of do their amazing things and broadcast to, over 50 languages. So people that, don't speak English or use English or have English as a second language, those kind of platforms are also pretty vital. So that's kind of an overview, I guess, of what we're doing. I'll sort of end there, because we've got a few other questions that no doubt we'll get into later.
And Annabelle, can you outline your approach, what's been put in place so far?
Yep. We've been looking at, we've been working on a lot of changes to propose regarding our contracting, regarding NZSPG criteria, and we've been looking at other initiatives that can support the industry to have production-ready projects when the COVID crisis moves to a level that allows production again. As you know, we do have a lot of business as usual. We're operating all the funds we would always have scheduled at this time, where we're still calling for productions to come in for production investment. So we want to deliver our usual services, but on top of that, we're looking at how to deal with what are approximately 28 projects that are in different stages of pre-production, post and release, that all need significant support to manage what's going on at the moment. That particular segment of projects may form the basis of a rescue package we hope to create and we hope to get the support of the ministry for that. And as Cam referenced, that's one of the ways in which we're talking to Ministry all the time, is how Ministry of Culture wants to find a way to support, wants to be able to put forward some funding ideas that would support our sector, and we're in discussion with them all the time. So if you look just at productions that were in play versus the next thing, we're already doing a lot of work on that. In terms of redirecting funds that may have been more associated with things that are about international activities, we are certainly redirecting funds and have drawn up a plan to get that approved so that we can focus on programs where producers and businesses with projects in advanced development that have strong proposals could move quickly into production in a post-COVID environment. So we were planning to launch Boost in approximately the next week or two anyway, and what we're looking to do is potentially expand the amount of funding that can go to Boost through redirecting our funds, and we hope that we can achieve that. Other ways we can do things is in terms of our other development funds, whether we can redirect more to early development, but we're interested in producer feedback on that. There's some producers who would give the feedback that, look, we really should be focusing this time on getting production ready and really be focusing funds on that, and we're interested in more feedback on that. And of course we're doing our guild meetings and catch-ups with guild, catch-up with the COVID group, talking to MB, of course, a lot, and about the international productions, and I can answer more questions about that later. Yeah.
Annabelle, just picking up on one thing, on the COVID group, because I know the COVID groups, and specifically the Screen Industry Guild, has been looking at health and safety.
Yep.
Once we come out of COVID, and what measures producers will need to take on their productions to ensure that they're safe. Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, we've funded some work being done. It's called the COVID Toolkit, and it's being prepared for producers and others by health and safety experts with international research standing behind it. And I believe that there's quite a bit of work has been done about how to position the health and safety issues that producers will face upon seeking to go back into production, and we've been supporting that work.
Annabelle, just following on from that, do you have a view about additional support to restart the productions that were impacted by COVID-19, so the ones that were actually in production and shut down?
Yeah, they're included in the 28. So we're really researching what are the possible impacts, what is the quantitative amount that those productions might need, and NZFC staff are talking to those producers and making a list of all the kinds of things. So we've got a pretty significant list of things that are likely to be cost impact because of COVID for projects trying to start up again, and that is we're looking at the total for that, a kind of a rescue package for that, and how to source the funding for that, which we're very hopeful the ministry will be able to support, but we can't confirm that at this stage. Oh, it's frozen.
Oh, I think we just all froze there.
Mm-hmm. Can I maybe just jump in, Sharon, because I guess it is as relevant to us and our sort of ironically, let's call it frozen productions, as it is the NZFC. We're the same. So we have done we've done something kind of sort of sweet and cool with a rapid response RFP that we put out into the market earlier this week, which was literally just we found we've got a little bit of money up our sleeves before we hit the end of the financial year. We had a number of people, because we're working within such a great creative community, come up with ideas that they believe could have been or can be created in lockdown. So content that is desperately needed on the broadcast sort of networks, if you like, the ones that have really taken a battering from a lack of advertising. So we put that out as a nice idea. We've had amazing reaction to it. Sort of concerningly amazing reaction, of course, because we don't have enormous amounts of money to put to it. And the reason for that is we're also keeping a little money back. I mean, whatever we have left to kind of take account of potentially the issue that Annabelle just talked about in terms of rescue package. We, like NZFC, as you would expect, have sort of put in a bid and have sort of said, look, this is money that is over and above what we would normally expect to spend. The issue for us, of course, is we want to keep any baseline funding that sort of is out beyond now for new productions. We don't want to have to touch that to help ones that have stalled, but of course the ones that have stalled are really, really important. They're ones that we need to see finished. So I think Annabelle and I and our respective teams are just trying to be as prudent as we can around, well, we don't know whether we're going to get any more money. I mean, every industry is hurting. No doubt every industry is asking for more money from Treasury or from their ministry. So we're sort of trying to sort of manage what is quite a tricky situation as best we can.
On that, sorry, Sharon, on that funding issue, there's been a few ideas bandied around the industry of how money could be reallocated or new money that could be found. Could you talk from your knowledge of the government sector, the feasibility of a couple of these ideas? One is that a quota or levy should be charged on Netflix, and the other is, can some of the SPIG money that was in theory going to be payable on the likes of Avatar and Lord of the Rings, could that be reapportioned to the domestic industry?
So we talk to MB a lot about these kinds of issues, and it is a multi-year appropriation. So those funds that were set aside to cover those projects would at the moment be left in place for when those projects come back and are ready to start. So they don't kind of spend them on a year by year, they place them in a multi-year appropriation. So it's not as if they then become available to spend, they just get moved into the new period. Plus there's a lot of pressure generally on all funds in government. So at this point, the approach that MB would take is to leave those funds in place, and that's how it usually works in relation to a multi-year appropriation for the international incentive.
Just picking up on that as well, Richard, I've had a couple of one-on-one conversations with producers in relation to both these ideas. And look, I want to start by saying, look, we want to hear any idea, honestly. You guys are at the coalface, you're dealing with it, you've got huge experience, so please don't be afraid of sending ideas through. The truth is, it's highly likely that any unappropriated money anywhere in the system right now is kind of being grabbed because of the size and scale of the issue. What we're hearing from government is that actually having a degree of specificity around what you think you need and what that would deliver is possibly better. So for instance, if we said, listen, if we could get, from an NZFC and NZ On Air perspective, if we could get some more money that might get up, let's call it, I don't know, 5 large-scale dramas from an NZ On Air perspective, what would that cost and what would that deliver? And if you kind of start to go, well, actually, that's going to deliver jobs for in excess of 120 kind of cast and crew per drama times 4 or 5. The environment that we're in right now with look, New Zealand arguably certainly looking better than a number of the other markets that normally create content, right? So you sort of go, what that would deliver is jobs, first and foremost, so get the economy back up and running. From our point of view, great local content that is badly needed for New Zealand audiences. But the other bonus is potentially export business, right? Because these dramas are going to be going into a market where there just is no competition. So we're kind of trying to get a little bit more structured around what we think might be sort of a rescue package, if you like, or whatever we want to call it, to sort of try and, see if we can get a result.
Yeah, because Cam and I are on a panel with the MCH regarding this precise issue, and it does speak to the way NZ On Air and NZFC together in partnership have to work for the industry, because we cover the whole industry together, not one of us on our own. And so we're working hard to get that right. We've put material into MCH already. We're refining it further. We're part of a process that's going to take a few weeks, as far as we've heard, in terms of this rescue package. So we know that MCH, the ministry, the ministers, they're listening, they're keen to be supportive. But as Cam says, there's a lot of work going on the rescue package in a general sense, and so that has obviously had to take priority at the moment for government.
Going back to one of Richard's questions too, Annabelle, can you speak to the quote, because we've had a lot of questions about levies on Netflix and Amazon, and just why that's possible under the New Zealand's GATT treaty obligations?
Well, I am not an expert on the GATT, but what I would understand is any treaty arrangement is quite broad in its coverage, and to move inside it and change one thing is complicated, and it's not necessarily possible. And the appetite to change an agreement that may have been created over a long period of time is not usually high. So that's my understanding as to why that particular issue is not able to be pursued. But we're interested in finding out more about that and what we could advocate in that regard. But we understand the same issue exists in Australia with the Australian-US trade agreement, is not one that can be unpicked in this regard.
Yeah, the problem, as I understand it, with the New Zealand signed up to all the GATT treaties, and the only cultural exemptions we got were for the New Zealand Film Commission and New Zealand On Air, and that's why, for example, the SPIG has to be administered by New Zealand Film Commission. It can't be administered by another body because it's a cultural exemption. So in order for us to be able to put quota or a levy on Netflix, it would require us to exit the GATT treaties, which isn't obviously feasible for the government. So it's a much more complicated issue than simply the government being able to introduce it, unfortunately. But is there an opportunity, picking up on Cam's point, in terms of if we manage to get ahead in terms of coming out of COVID earlier and being able to produce drama, is there an opportunity there to forge closer alliances with the streamers to be providing product to them, because obviously they'll be desperate for new products along with everyone else.
Yeah, and we, as you would imagine, talk with the streamers and the studios internationally all the time because of, just in the first instance, the production attraction side of things, but also the other arm, which is the commissioning arms. And so in recent times, we've certainly been talking to those entities, but I believe that everyone will be in a better position to plan for that in the coming weeks. And so our next plan is to work with those streamers to see the extent to which we could set up some arrangements or discussions or work out what's the best way to work with those streamers during this time. Obviously, production is ceased all over the world, and their commissioners are still commissioning, their commissioners still developing, still, potentially their development budgets are going to expand during these times, let's hope. But I think that's a really important task for us. We agree with you that that's what we need to be doing. And so we're just testing when's the best time to do it, when people are ready to say, yeah, this is what we're looking for when production starts again.
Great. Cam, I've got a question from you, for you. The next New Zealand On Air round is the most competitive, with too many projects vying for too little money. Can this be changed? Could the broadcasters, including Sky and Prime, identify the shows they most want? Could New Zealand On Air then commit to funding shows that can be made in this financial year? And in a nutshell, can we make a round that make it happen rather than a round that is a competitive round?
It's actually a really good question. I guess it sort of goes to the heart of what we're really hoping to try and achieve by making a case for it's sort of almost like a one-off, if you like, a one-off increase to budget that sort of says, if we could get 4 or 5 of these dramas up because they're ready, and you know, and it's an extraordinary time. That would, I guess, be something we would be, you know, massively keen to try and achieve. To Annabelle's point, and it is a good question. The issue for us is just the length of time it's going to take for us to understand whether or not we're going to be successful with any additional funding. And of course, the round is coming up. So, yeah, look, I guess the point is we're definitely prepared to kind of move with the industry and support it as best we can. Of course, it would be far more sensible for us to approve, you know, 2 or 3 productions that can go straight away, as opposed to, you know, 1 or 2 that still need a whole bunch more time, when actually we just need to get people working, right? So, yeah, look, as I say, always open to ideas, and I can kind of put that back into the sort of the, you know, the way that we kind of work through the process. And of course, to Annabelle's point, in terms of them being in constant contact with the studios and Netflix, we're in constant contact with, you know, with the broadcasters who commission that work. So it would be very easy for us to have a conversation with them to determine which ones they kind of prefer. The trick for us, and no doubt it's the same with Annabelle, is trying to spread the kind of the benefit, if you like. So, you know, we want to try and make sure that, you know, different entities or different production companies or different kind of parts of the country end up, you know, kind of all sort of gaining somehow. But I think the bottom line is we want to get the crew and cast and great ideas up and running.
Yeah.
And Annabelle, obviously the Film Commission's highly reliant on lottery income. It's your principal funder. Have you got concerns, given that the lottery, you know, the majority of its sales are in dairies, etc., now that it's gone online, that you'll see a drop in your funding for the next financial year? We
are seeking to find out what would be the new estimates because of this change. We have been in touch with lotteries, and we will have more information next week. But it is the majority of our funding. It is, I think, you know, at least 17 million on average per annum. And if there is a significant drop, that will affect a lot of our current planning for this financial year and for next financial year. And the issues that will affect how it drops or otherwise or stays stable will be to do with how long are we in lockdown, or how well do people take up the lottery's online offerings, which have been successful. And New Zealanders do gamble online a lot. We're using lots of different companies, in fact. So when they choose our lottery system, it helps the culture industry. And so if an online engagement increases in their brand, then potentially that will be a way of saving the expected amounts that we would have planned for. So yeah, we don't know the answer to that, but we're very, very sensitive to it and understanding of needing to know as soon as possible.
A question, sorry, Sharon.
No, go, Richard.
A question for you both, and it's more towards the Film Commission, but increasingly for both agencies, foreign funding is very important in projects to bolster the budget. If New Zealand comes out of COVID earlier than internationally, it's obviously our borders could well remain closed, and it'll limit international cast and other parties coming in. Do you think you'll have to loosen your criteria around third-party finance and potentially have to fund a greater level of productions to compensate that, because we may not be able to practically get the money into the country?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what you're implying there is that the foreign money is often attached to the global cast, and that if we can't get them in, then the foreign money won't come. Is that sort of the basis of your question?
Yeah, it's twofold. It's that often the money is tied to cast, but also, you know, we've already seen with transmission in Australia, with a whole rash of redundancies, that, you know, a lot of these companies may not, you know, are either going to be streamlined or may not even survive. So there may not be the level of money out there either. I mean, it's sort of a complete contradiction. On one hand, we've got an industry desperate for content, but there may not actually be the facilities to finance it.
Yeah, I think it's a real concern and consideration. The marketing department are in discussion a lot with sales agents, and there is a plan for a virtual market for Cannes this year. And so we're still planning for speed dating with those sales agents, virtual speed dating, like we normally do in Cannes, with the sales agents that are still keen to be part of that, and there are many that are. So I think we need to do a report on what's going to be a potential wash up for this, and I'd say it's still very fluid, but that is a significant danger, significant risk that we lose international finance, or not lose it, but that it is harder to get. But I think starting up early is an advantage, and that the New Zealand will be able to see that and take that advantage.
Do you think, Annabelle?
Sorry, I was just going to just a slightly different view, but a similar kind of point around NZ On Air. So what we are highly likely to see is broadcasters in difficult times. I mean, they already are, obviously, with the advertising revenue that they're all sort of funded on disappearing almost overnight. So I think the question that you're asking, Richard, is kind of, what level of flexibility or change might there need to be? And I think both agencies are just going to have to embrace what the new normal is, right? So from our point of view, I think we may be in a position where we can help broadcasters by saying, well, actually the level of commitment that we're expecting of you in order to commission programs may reduce. Now, I'm not sort of saying that will be the case, but if you have a look at where they're at, we have to all have an eye to how on earth are we going to kind of get through this in a new way. So I think Annabelle would say the same thing. Obviously, this is definitely a time for us to be looking at policy resets potentially if it's going to ensure that the industries continue.
Yeah, I think all the things that were driving change prior to COVID, being the issues around streaming services, the issues around theatrical, the difficulties of financing in any case, even pre-COVID, they remain as strong as ever. And under these circumstances, we have to act, and we will need to change the criteria around theatrical requirements or market requirements, or equity percentages. And on that same note, we already formed a list of things that we would believe could be very helpful in variation of the SPIG, of the Screen Production Grant, that will make it possible for projects in the midst of what they're doing to better cope with COVID, and that can also support future projects under the as yet unknown conditions in a kind of declining COVID situation where we're not sure what it's going to look like.
And added to that list of issues is obviously pressures on the budget as well. And we've had a question: can New Zealand On Air and New Zealand Film Commission help with likely increased costs of insurance and other unbudgeted, unforeseen additional costs? And that could be health and safety or what have you.
Yeah, we've certainly been looking. That's part of the notion for the rescue fund, as it were, for those projects that we're already aware of. But I think you're also implying in future there'll be much bigger line items around safety, and so I think that's what we're going to have to take account of too, subject to what happens with our budget. So yeah, I agree that that's on a list of things that we've got that are part of our proposals around how budgets may be affected by COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. The fundamental problem is just going to be how much money we have and what we can do with it, right? But I think that it's an obvious point. If the cost of production increases because insurance and other line items go up, or because you need, different types of ways of shooting because we're still having to kind of keep social distancing as part of our health and safety plan, then that's going to have to be addressed. Obviously, that the worry for me is, really what we want is the money to be going into the pockets of the people that are kind of out there working and getting kind of employment up, right? But yeah, there is unfortunately a fundamental truth about some of these things that are just going to have to be dealt with. And to Annabelle's point, I guess part of that is us sort of trying to load that into a new package so it doesn't impact on our sort of baselines. We'll just have to see how we go.
And do you think we need to start thinking of ways for international productions to start as well? And we've had a suggestion, like chartering a plane for offshore actors, producers, and letting them go through a period of quarantine and self-isolation before they start work. Like those sort of, have you started thinking about those possibilities?
So with international productions, my sense would be that those major corporations are absolutely focused on how do you solve this problem, and that they will be thinking of everything, including that. We know that they would be thinking a lot about how to do ongoing testing for crew, and that will become a very significant aspect of everybody's employment in the time coming out of COVID and into the next stage, whatever that looks like. That I think testing will become something that happens a lot. Immunity will be important. I think, you know, the issue of starting up a production and then an essential element coming down with COVID, or even just a crew member coming down with COVID who then causes 10 people around them to need to go home and self-isolate. Managing that process is going to take a lot of thinking and financial thinking and capacity to test.
We've had a couple of questions around expanding the use of New Zealand On Air funding and New Zealand grant funding together. So currently it covers children's drama and animation, and can that be expanded to include drama and comedy?
Yeah, that is one of the topics within the proposals for the Screen Production Grant and its criteria and how to change it so that if you've got NZ On Air money, unless you're children's and or animation, you can't access the SPIG. We're talking about that. We've referenced it to MCH. They're aware that that will be one of the things we'd be putting on the list. There'll be a number of things that you could do in the Screen Production Grant changes that are simple. You know, it's roundabout changes to deadlines. There are other things that go to the technical criteria in such a way as they must go to Cabinet for decision, because that's the nature of how this SPG is set up. And so there'll be things that are quick, that could turn around quickly, and there are things that may take a little bit longer. The good thing is that our legislation can, you know, the Cabinet can make those decisions, and that's not so common with all incentive regimes.
Yeah, just to kind of throw in there, I think this is a sort of a classic example of how Film Commission and NZ On Air have been working over the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's pretty, I have to say, it's pretty extraordinary that we've got Annabelle on this call. I mean, she's just gone through pretty significant sort of health challenges, and she hasn't missed a call that I've been on in the last couple of weeks. We're probably meeting every day at the moment. And are probably on similar calls at least twice a day, actually. So, you know, a number of these things we have been talking about, and we are sort of really trying to work as much as we can as sort of an entity that's representing the, you know, the production sector across, you know, as much as we can. So yeah, it's been really good.
Good. What sort of fast turnaround for development and production? Sort of, what have you come up with, any new approaches that you can offer, or partnering with other bodies just to keep momentum going?
Not really following the question. Could you put that in another way? Meaning, how do we get the dollars out the door as fast as we can?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. The key thing is that we keep running the programs that we've always intended to run. And when you say partner with another organisation, could you give me an example, and I might be able to speak to that?
Yeah, I guess the example that I would have would actually be partnering with New Zealand On Air. So
okay.
It requires quite a change. Yeah, I guess
the more you partner, you do add a few people to the mix. That means it just takes a bit longer to get the technical's done. But I agree that if we can do more with NZ on Air, I mean, we've always done things with NZ on Air, but if we could do more, we certainly will. Yeah.
Great. Now, Richard, I've got a couple more that I was going to end on.
I'll just pick up on a big question, if I may. Just is up for discussion as well, potentially dropping the minimum spend QNZP threshold?
In the feature film category?
In feature films, yeah, given it could well in the medium term be, as we've discussed, more challenging to get international finance. Is there the potential to, for discussion of dropping that threshold to make it easier for producers to make up the finance?
Yeah, that is it. So you mean that we could pull the threshold down to $500,000 for a feature film instead of 2.5?
Yeah, so say similar levels to Australia, for example.
Yeah. I mean, we believe that would be a good change to make, and we have generally spoken about it, and I know the ministry was keen to see what happened with the 2030 strategy, viewing that as the way in which industry would tell ministry that they want to do that. So I know that the 2030 strategy is currently trying to take account now of COVID, but if that kind of suggestion were in the 2030 strategy, that would also be another way of expressing it to ministry instead of just us. The other issue is to do with, yes, if they were to change the clause around projects that are going to go to broadcast one-off telefeatures, for example, you've probably got a threshold there that works well as long as you're allowed to have NZFC money or NZ on Air money in a one-off so-called telefeature. And so that's an interesting way to go through. Off the top of my head, I think it's 800,000 per hour minimum threshold on a telefeature. So that you need to have to change that clause to allow discretionary funding from NZ on Air and NZFC to activate the SPIG in that way. But whether it's easier to do that clause change or to do let's make the minimum $500,000, but then you've still got to change the clause around theatrical, because, and we are talking about that. That's one of the lines that we're talking about, because there's projects that will finish up and be ready to release, and there isn't a cinema for them to release in, and they may get a great streamer opportunity. And so we're definitely putting that idea in our list to MCH for consideration.
So that would be relaxing that market, criteria. Annabelle and Cam, have you done any sort of work on what the forecasting is likely to be like in terms of sales and distribution and exhibition? It's probably more for Annabelle, but have you had a chance to even think about that?
I know that Jasmine McSweeney in marketing is in touch all the time with the distributors, exhibitors and sales agents around those issues, but she doesn't have figures on it yet. I think we've all seen the way it dropped just before everything shut down. So yeah, but I don't have a specific answer to that, I'm sorry.
I think it's probably a little bit too early. What about you, Cam? Have you had a chance to think about the future, or still a little bit early for you too?
Oh, he's on mute.
On mute.
Sorry, the joys of Zoom. Yeah, possibly, and obviously our main focus is always on delivering sort of to local audiences first and foremost. But look, I had a really interesting conversation with one producer yesterday who was sort of indicating, in fact, actually I've had a couple of conversations as I look at Richard's name, with producers who are sort of saying, listen, we can see some pretty decent advances and or quite a lot of support internationally for us, continuing to either create content that was already approved and might go into a second season or new content. My sense of it is I think the international market's going to be really, really buoyant for us if we can get up and get going quickly. But yeah, I mean, who knows?
Okay, I've got a question just around the COVID-19 Action Pan Sector Group. Is there anything else that we can be doing as an industry, in your opinion, or where do you need more help?
Well, I think it would be great if producers thinking about their projects, I'm presuming they're doing this, that they're running the scenarios around if they start up again, what do they do if they have to pause? So if they're starting up in a kind of alert 2 kind of scenario where the advisor is for social distancing, how are producers seeing that? And what are the kind of financial risks that they see? Scenario run, finances run, you know, it'd be great to have a significant conversation that's very specific where a producer is quite engaged in, you know, I want to get my project up on such and such a date. If it's alert level 2, I reckon I can do it. I will carry risks of pausing and of shutdown and of hiatus. They will cost this amount. I think we need to see those figures. We're seeing a few of them in relation to some of our projects in post that are delayed by some aspects of their post situation. But yeah, running scenarios about their own projects, looking at what the actual costs and risks are, both financially and from I guess a duty of care, and helping us really understand what the issues are would be really helpful.
Great. Cam, is there anything that you can think of that the industry needs to be doing, or where we can help a bit more?
Look, I think the industry is doing a huge amount, and it's pretty amazing to see just, you know, the amount of groups that are coming together. I'm really interested to see what the survey comes out. I know that SPADA have been involved in creating that sort of survey out to the industry, just kind of getting a sense of the overall issue. For our part, we're about to send a smaller survey out just to our funded productions in the next week or so, just to try to Annabelle's point, actually, just to try and get a sense of what the size and scale of the issue might be, and not just now, but potentially sort of further on down the line. So I think we see it as a bit of a pulse. We're collecting up information literally on an hourly basis, just simply on the calls and everything else that we've got, and through the likes of TVNZ and MediaWorks. But yeah, I mean, certainly for me, I'd be saying please look out for that survey that's going to be coming through. One of the things actually that the COVID group suggested, which resulted in Annabelle and I jumping on a call yesterday, that resulted on this very kind of thing now, was sort of a level of communication. And I think that was a realization for me coming off the group meeting the other day, is that I don't think the industry quite realised just how much we do know how bad it is, how passionate we are to help, and we are, you know, we're all over this, honestly. I mean, I was on the phone to MCH last night at 7:30. You know, I think the very fact that we're having those calls at sort of those hours with one of the lovely women there sort of trying to manage a bath with 3 kids in it. So we are engaging. I think just keeping on communicating. Ideally, really what we want to try and do is get to a point where we're all clear around what our sort of plan is, and then we continue to kind of communicate that in a consistent way through the channels that exist.
Yeah. Communication is hard, I think, because we don't want to put out another statement with a gunner in it. We really want to get the technical stuff sorted and know how we can help. But we really like having informal meetings like this. Having the COVID group meeting has been great. We've had a couple of Guild online meetings. You know, we've gotten together as NZ On Air, Te Manga Pāhau, etc. What I would love to do is establish potentially a weekly thing like this with SPADA, so that we can communicate and take questions to try and do it as effectively as possible. Because if we're talking individually to everyone, we're not working on the solution. We want to be working on the solution where we're doing the paperwork you have to do, we're analysing all the terms of trade and creating the papers, and also delivering the usual grant systems. So communication being driven by industry or asking us to speak is great. I also want to say how great it is to have that group of 2030 converge into the COVID group. I think having a pan-industry group is fantastic. It's very difficult for either the Film Commission or NZ On Air to represent across the industry in one fell swoop. You know, Cam and I, as I said before, can do it together, but we also appreciate when industry forms and decides things together.
Can we help you in any way, or can the industry help you in any way accessing more funds by, you know, with strategic arguments, or can we provide any help in that regard?
I would say yes. What we are being asked for is data. We're being asked for really sort of specific information about what the costs are, or, you know, what are we, you know, so for instance, we're putting together a paper now. We can kind of we'll be able to pull it together reasonably well ourselves, but you know, it is around, hey, if we were to get, say, 4 more dramas up, what would the potential audience size of that be? How many cast and crew might that, you know, hire? What sort of level of economic activity might that deliver? So, you know, I think certainly SPADA, you know, I think to Annabelle's points, I think there are natural groupings as well as the COVID group, right? So, you know, you guys represent a really, really big and important group of people that have a lot of information at their fingertips. So, you know, if you can kind of get us sort of any sort of information you think would be relevant around potential international opportunities, what that might look like. You know, if we're going in to make a case for, you know, new local films or drama, what the likely potential sort of export opportunity of that might look like alongside the local kind of employment and things like that, I think that would be really, really good.
And I have a question here. Can we tap into the brightest creative minds? So Peter Jackson, Andrew Adamson, Taika, James Cameron and others to come up with ideas for using their offshore networks to bring funding for more New Zealand-based production? We
certainly want to do that for sure. And we've talked about setting a program where we are connecting with our New Zealanders overseas who have strong ties and are highly influential. We'd like to do some programs with them as mentors, with them as potentially driving a project. And so that is on one of the things that we've been developing and pulling together. I think it would be great to have all our New Zealanders come home for that.
Yeah. Okay, Richard, do you have anything else?
I think probably for this week we've covered off just one comment. I noticed, you know, from the trades that the BFI, for example, in the UK have launched a hardship fund. Has there been discussions between the agencies of doing something similar in New Zealand?
What we have to be mindful of is the rescue package and not doubling up on it. I think that's one of our pieces of guidance, I think, from Ministry, is that, and I think, Cam, you put it in a good way in terms of we fund and activate content, and that's our usual remit. For us to become individual rescue package entities makes it potentially confusing in relation to the rescue package that's already set up. And whether you, if industry gives us feedback that they're not being covered by this package, which we all know that in many ways there's always going to be gaps, but I know the Ministry is interested in the gaps. What are the gaps? How could we fill those gaps? That would be really useful feedback.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I don't have anything else. So, Richard, unless you've got anything else, then thank you very much, Annabelle and Cam.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us
guys.
today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
nice to see you. Yeah, pleasure. Hope you're all well, safe, healthy in your bubbles.
Yes, stay well, and I don't recommend this. It's very interesting to palpably have the illness when you're talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
That could be a whole new chapter, Annabelle, next week.
Okay.
Thanks you.
All.
Thanks. Speak next week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.